Disney's been dropping a lot of news recently about what we can expect here at the Walt Disney World Resort in coming years. But here's the thing, the way they've been doing it, it feels kind of off. It's almost like they're tossing out breadcrumbs, you know, in hopes that we might miss something and not get a sense of the bigger picture, rather than coming out and proudly stating what their vision for the future is. And let me tell you what, I know I've said this before, but I'm gonna say it again, this does not inspire confidence, and it certainly doesn't inspire trust. But look, that's a bigger problem that we can really dig into some other time. Today, I wanna focus my energy talking about another one of those breadcrumbs, a new resort coming to Walt Disney World and planned to open in 2027. It's going to be called the Lakeshore Lodge, and I've got a lot of thoughts. So get comfortable and let's dig in. So among other recent announcements, like the location of Monsters Inc. Land over in Hollywood Studios, ultimately taking the place of Muppet Vision 3D, or where the Cars attraction is going to go in Magic Kingdom, replacing the Rivers of America and Tom Sawyer Island, we've now learned that there's also going to be a new hotel opening right here in the Walt Disney World Resort, set again to open in 2027. The property is going to be called Lakeshore Lodge, and it's going to be a Disney Vacation Club property located on the former site of River Country. If you're not exactly sure where this is, it's in a space nestled right next to Fort Wilderness and in the neighborhood of Wilderness Lodge. The resort is planned to be a 10-story building, and it's supposed to be themed to nature-inspired Disney themes, and that's all we know so far. Now, if all this sounds pretty familiar, a DVC property, the theme, the location, that's because it is. This project is essentially the resurrection of another project that Disney scrapped not all that long ago. Back then, it was called Reflections, a Lakeshore Lodge, and it was also a Disney Vacation Club property located on the former site of River Country. And look, I don't want to say that this is a complete copy and paste job, mainly because we just don't have enough details, at least not yet. But from where I'm sitting, it does kind of look like this project was just pulled straight from the grave. And look, this is a pattern that we've been seeing a lot with Disney recently. And sure, you may not have noticed it if you haven't been following along with Disney news for a long time. I'm talking about years, but many of the ideas that we've seen announced for the Walt Disney World Resort alone, they're recycled. They're things we've heard about before. Ideas that had been announced or teased and then scrapped. And now they're making their way onto the main stage, which is fantastic, especially for people who have been waiting years and years for this door coaster, for example, or a Villain's Land. But this pattern of announcing something, scrapping it, and then surprise, it's back, almost as if no one would notice. Again, something I feel like I've been saying so much recently, but it just kind of goes to show you how much I think Disney anticipates people will ignore or forget about. It's starting to feel a little bit like a lack of fresh ideas, creativity even. And again, I know that that's something that we've been talking about a lot recently, and I mean, there's no way to avoid that as part of the discussion because it's so apparent across the board. So, you know, no one wants that to be true. But if it is, you know? But look, let me break down some of my thoughts more specifically on the Lakeshore Lodge, because I've been thinking about this quite a bit and I have a lot to say, and I'm sure that you do too, so I do want to start this conversation and see what you have to say as well. So first and foremost, I'm kind of frustrated. Actually, I'm quite frustrated that what we're looking at here is another Disney Vacation Club property. Don't get me wrong, I understand the appeal of DVC. I am a DVC member. But the last time Disney opened a non-Disney Vacation Club resort was what? 1999 with All-Star Movies. That's of course in the value category, and we did get Grand Destino Tower over at Coronado Springs in 2019, but that's an expansion of an already existing resort, not something new. And at least in my opinion, that's hardly the same thing. But I mean, it makes sense that Disney would be leaning into Disney Vacation Club properties. Of course, in recent years, although more accurately it's been over 2 decades, Disney's really been focusing in on Disney Vacation Club properties, and it makes sense why they would, because it's easy money. I also think it's a bit of a cop-out, but we'll get more into that here in a second. See, when building these resorts, they can use Disney Vacation Club members who are purchasing in to Disney Vacation Club at these new properties in order to finance the properties. So Disney really doesn't have to shoulder that cost themselves. Members help with that. And they help in years to come as well, especially with member dues. Those cover things like maintenance, upkeep, other costs that will be shared and not shouldered by Disney alone. And there are, of course, other reasons that Disney might lean toward Disney Vacation Club properties versus standard properties as well, even just talking about cost. I mean, one of the first things that comes to mind, at least for me, is housekeeping. I know we've talked a lot about this over the past year, but housekeeping schedules are different for Disney Vacation Club properties than they are for standard properties. And this could be, presumably, one of the reasons that Disney would go with a Disney Vacation Club property versus a standard property. Less frequent housekeeping could very well mean less housekeeping staff required, and that can cut costs for Disney. But I also said that going with a Disney Vacation Club property is a bit of a cop-out, and I stand by that. You know, Disney doesn't have to try as hard when it comes to making Disney Vacation Club properties. This is something that has been proven to them time and time again as they continue to open properties that offer less, whether it's through theming, location, the list is long. But Disney Vacation Club members, they invest a lot in their membership, and that has them coming back year after year. That's not as much of a given when we talk about a non-DVC property. You have to impress people right away or you can lose that clientele. That's just not as common when we talk about Disney Vacation Club. But look, where does all of this leave everyone who's not a Disney Vacation Club member? You know, the many families, like I used to be, like so many of you are, who want to vacation at Walt Disney World. You want to stay at a Walt Disney World Resort hotel, but you can't or don't want to invest in a Disney Vacation Club membership because it is really expensive. There are all these properties accommodating DVC members, but what about everyone else? I mean, let's not forget, Disney did just eliminate a moderate accommodation in favor of a Disney Vacation Club accommodation at a nearby resort. Of course, I'm talking about the cabins at Fort Wilderness, which once they were updated, rather than remaining in that moderate category, were changed over to DVC. So quite literally eliminating that moderate option and making it a more exclusive, more expensive, more difficult to access option. Of course, this update hasn't been completed as of yet, so we haven't felt the full effects of what it looks like to completely eliminate this moderate option, but it's happening, just like it happened in other locations. The Riviera is another great example. But look, I think that this is super disappointing, especially in this location in particular, a place where this middle-of-the-road option once was, and now, quite frankly, people who don't have that deluxe budget or that Disney Vacation Club budget, they're being pushed out again. And it didn't have to be like this, because Disney could have used this as an opportunity to fill that gap, but instead we're getting another exclusive property. But look, setting aside the fact that this is going to be a Disney Vacation Club property, and that rubs me the wrong way, I do want to talk a little bit about the location itself, because I do have some questions and concerns about putting a 10-story building like Lakeshore Lodge will be in this space. So like I mentioned earlier, Lakeshore Lodge is going to sit nearby Fort Wilderness. It's going to be very close to that area where you may have visited to enjoy Hoop-Dee-Doo Review, or if you wanted to check out Tri-Circle T Ranch, but it's also going to be in the neighborhood of Wilderness Lodge. But here's the thing, and where my main concern comes from. This area, it's kind of already under strain. I mean, we're not talking about a huge swath of land here. We're talking about a space that was once a relatively small water park. Adding a 10-story building in this space with the capacity to house hundreds of families and all of their vehicles, dining needs, and the transportation demands, it all feels a little short-sighted to me, and almost as though there wasn't a ton of consideration for guest experience. It's honestly the same situation we've been speculating about when we think about the Polynesian Tower, located between Polynesian and Grand Floridian. It's the new tower that's set to open really soon, actually. Where we once had a restaurant, like just a simple restaurant, we now have this multi-level structure that can house a number of people that can't really be adequately accommodated by this space. And while it hasn't opened up quite yet, at least not as I sit here and chat with you today. We have been in this area, we've wandered around, and we've seen the strain that even just the construction crews have on this space. And it's not just something that's going to be felt by guests who are staying at the Polynesian Island Tower, it's also something that is probably going to overflow into the Grand Floridian, especially with its proximity to the parking over at the Grand Floridian. And look, I know that we are very much still not entirely aware of what the impact of this new tower at the Polynesian will be on the area. We'll just have to wait and find out. I do plan on checking that out as soon as it opens. But it's super early when we start talking about Lakeshore Lodge. But it's hard for me not to see the parallels. And so I do want to add my thoughts on that to the discussion. And maybe I'll stand corrected, you know, when everything opens up, the space will turn out to be utilized and organized in a way that is much more seamless than I think it will be. I'll happily stand corrected if that's the case. And I'm crossing my fingers that it is. But look, I'll be brutally honest with you right now. It's been kind of hard to be optimistic when it comes to things like this. And that's not because I'm looking for things to be upset about or because I'm a half glass full kind of girl. I try to stay optimistic, give people the benefit of the doubt, and play devil's advocate. I try to be aware of the kinks that need to be worked out. But that can be a huge challenge, especially when time and time again, as new projects get announced and we see the final product, it's one disappointment after another. So I'm doing my best. I'm trying not to constantly be fixated on the negative, but at the same time, I always want to keep things real. And this is what that looks like, at least right now. But look, finally, before we wrap things up, I want to address the elephant in the room. The way Disney's sharing this information, or more accurately, the way that they're not. You know, I waited a long time to sit down with you and chat about this, and it's not because I was procrastinating, but because I was waiting for more solid information, more details to be released. I wanted Disney to give us something to sink our teeth into, but we barely got enough information to know more than, yeah, this is happening, which I anticipated was going to be on the horizon anyway, especially with so many people talking about how construction had started back up in this space again. I mean, you may have even seen people talking about cranes and construction material. You could see it from the monorail and the boats. So it wasn't really a secret that something was going on, but we didn't know exactly what. Though there were a lot of people talking about this, speculating that it was reflections risen from the grave. But honestly, from Disney and DVC, it's mostly been radio silence. Again, these breadcrumbs that they're tossing out there. Doing the bare minimum to share the information for the sake of sharing it, but not really drumming up excitement. And that reflects poorly, at least in my opinion, on Disney and DVC. It shows a lack of confidence, and it doesn't feel like they trust what it is that they're doing, what they're coming up with and putting out there. And I don't know how we're supposed to trust it if they don't trust it themselves. But look, at the end of the day, those are my thoughts on Disney's new property that they have just barely announced, Lakeshore Lodge. You know, we're looking at another Disney Vacation Club property in an already kind of crowded space with a loose theme to nature and not much more information coming out of Disney to inspire any confidence or excitement, at least not for me. But I'd love to know your thoughts, so share them all with me in a comment down below. Are you excited for this property? Would you have rather seen something else? Tell us all about it and share your thoughts, because of course this is a conversation and we'd love to know what you have to say. But for now, that's about all. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. And until then, I hope you have a fantastic day wherever it is you are. Bye, guys.